I always knew marrying David meant accepting the shadow of his first wife, Eleanor. She wasn't just a deceased spouse, she was a legend, a beautiful, tragic figure whose life was cut short too soon. David and Eleanor were high school sweethearts, the kind of couple everyone envied. She died suddenly, a little over 3 years before I met David. A terrible, unexpected fall down the stairs in their old, sprawling Victorian house, the same house David and I live in now. David rarely spoke about her, which I initially respected as grief. But sometimes, when he looked at me, there was a fleeting, unsettling sadness in his eyes that wasn't about love for me. It was about the loss of her. Her absence was a palpable thing in the house, like a draft that no window could seal. But the real ghost in my life wasn't Eleanor. It was my mother-in-law, Martha. Martha Thompson is a woman carved from granite and steel. She is elegant, fiercely controlling, and possesses a passive-aggressive demeanor that could weaponize a polite "bless your heart." She tolerated me, but she never accepted me. I was the replacement, the woman who dared to occupy Eleanor's space. From the moment I got engaged to David, Martha made it clear that Eleanor was superior in every conceivable way. Eleanor was a better cook, a more dedicated wife, a more attentive daughter-in-law. My wedding dress, she informed me with a saccharine smile, was lovely, but Eleanor's was classic. Every visit was an agonizing examination where I always fell short. The most unnerving thing, though, was Martha's obsession with Eleanor's death. She would often bring it up, not with sadness, but with a strange, almost performative reverence. It was such a terrible accident. She would sigh dramatically during family dinners, looking directly at me. Eleanor was always so clumsy. Who would have thought a simple trip on the stairs could take such a perfect soul? David would always visibly tense up at these mentions, his jaw clenching. He would quickly change the subject, sometimes even outright snapping at his mother to "drop it, Mom." His discomfort was obvious, but I put it down to the raw pain of the memory. It all came to a head on the 5-year anniversary of Eleanor's death. David was a wreck. He took the day off work, locked himself in his study, and refused to see anyone. Martha, however, decided it was the perfect day to descend upon us, unannounced. I found her in the sunroom rearranging a vase of roses I had placed there. She didn't look mournful. She looked calculating. "You know, Clara," she said without even turning around, "David is never going to truly love you the way he loved Eleanor. You simply aren't the same caliber." I was used to her barbs, but today they stung harder. "Martha, that's unfair. I love David, and we have a very happy life." She finally turned, and the look in her eyes was cold, almost predatory. "Happy? Is it? Do you ever wonder why the police ruled it an accident so quickly? David was devastated, of course, but they didn't look very hard. They just saw a distraught widower and a faulty antique rug. They closed the case in 3 weeks. Her tone wasn't accusatory toward the police. It was boasting. It was as if she was claiming the speed of the investigation as a personal achievement. "What are you implying, Martha?" I asked, my voice suddenly tight. She smiled then, a small, chilling, upward curl of her lips that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm implying that sometimes a mother has to do whatever is necessary to protect her son. Eleanor was breaking David, Clara. She was too volatile, too demanding. She was draining his finances and his spirit. The boy I raised was disappearing." I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach. Protect him? You mean financially? How could she break him with an accidental fall? Martha leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, although there was no one else in the room. The stairs, my dear, are very old. They creak, but they are sturdy. A faulty rug can cause a trip, but a small, strategically placed piece of hard, slick tile under the rug, just at the edge of the top step, well, that is less accidental, that is definitive. I stared at her, utterly horrified. My mind was screaming, she just confessed. It was the most shocking, terrifying thing I had ever heard. The sunroom suddenly felt suffocating. You put something there, I stammered. You are saying you caused her to fall? Martha merely raised an eyebrow, a gesture that conveyed both confirmation and utter lack of remorse. I merely ensured the accident was fatal, Clara. I removed the element of chance, and David was spared a lifetime of misery. Think of it as a preemptive strike for his future happiness, a future you are now benefiting from. She looked at me, her gaze piercing, as if challenging me to breathe a word. Now, if you'll excuse me, I must go check on my poor, grieving son. And perhaps you should consider what happens to people who try to come between me and David. She walked away, leaving me frozen in the sunroom, the roses now seeming to bleed red in the late afternoon sun. I was married to a man whose mother was a murderer, and I was now the beneficiary and the keeper of her monstrous secret. I spent the rest of the day in a paralyzed state. The words, a strategically placed piece of hard, slick tile, echoing in my head like a gavel striking a judge's desk. It wasn't just that Martha was a murderer. It was the casual, almost proud way she had delivered the confession. It was her gift to me, a terrifying reminder of her power and her twisted definition of protecting her son. I locked myself in the bathroom, splashing cold water on my face, trying to scrub away the horror. My immediate, visceral reaction was to call the police, to expose her. But then reality slammed into me with brutal force. David. If I went to the police, I would destroy David's life. He would lose his mother, a woman he was emotionally dependent on, even if he often fought with her. His world, already fragile due to Eleanor's death, would utterly collapse. Worse, would the police believe me? A new wife, disliked by the deceased's mother-in-law, claiming a murder that had been ruled an accident 5 years prior? Martha was a pillar of the community. I was merely the replacement. They would think I was jealous or mentally unstable. The weight of the secret was staggering. Every creak of the old house sounded like a footstep on the wrong stair. Every time David smiled at me, I saw the blood of his first wife on his mother's hands. I started to look at David differently. He was still in his study, grieving the ghost of Eleanor. I knocked softly and entered. He was sitting in the dark, a whiskey glass in his hand, looking utterly defeated. "Are you okay, darling?" I asked, my voice shaky despite my effort to sound normal. "No," he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It never gets easier." It was such a senseless, stupid way to go. If only she hadn't been so careless with that old rug. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. Careless with that old rug. Did David know? Did he suspect? Or was he truly just grieving the accident? I sat beside him. "David, tell me about that night again. The night Eleanor died. I need to understand." He hesitated, then took a long drink. "I told you everything, Clara." It was late. We had a silly fight. She was going upstairs. I heard a muffled cry, and then a terrible thud. I rushed out, and she was just lying there at the bottom of the landing. I called 911. The police interviewed me for hours. They kept asking if we had pushed each other, if it was an argument gone wrong. And what about your mother? Where was Martha? I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. She arrived pretty fast. I called her immediately after 9/11. She rushed over. She was the one who managed everything. She handled the funeral, the police, the media. She was my rock, honestly. She shielded me from the whole mess. She shielded me. Martha hadn't just shielded him. She had orchestrated the entire cover-up. She had arrived quickly because she likely wanted to ensure the tile was gone, or that her narrative was the first one the authorities heard. A distraught mother comforting her son would never be scrutinized. But the question remained, why did she tell me? The chilling answer dawned on me. Martha didn't tell me as a confession. She told me as a warning and an act of dominance. She was staking her claim. She was telling me, I got rid of the last woman who threatened my son's happiness. If you step out of line, I will get rid of you too, and you can't even tell anyone because if you do, you destroy David. By giving me the secret, she had effectively bound me to her. I was now complicit and unwilling partner in her crime, simply by keeping silent. The knowledge was a poisoned gift. Over the next few days, I became obsessed. I needed to find the proof. I couldn't just take a known manipulator's word for it. I started carefully examining the old staircase. I ran my hands over the wood, feeling for loose floorboards or any sign of disturbance. The stairs were wide, dark wood, heavy and solid. The top landing was covered by a thick runner, a replica of the original Eleanor had chosen. I waited until David was at work and Martha was at her weekly bridge game. I lifted the corner of the heavy rug at the top of the landing. I felt beneath it, and my fingers encountered a section of the wood that felt subtly different. I grabbed a small flashlight and a screwdriver from David's workbench. Prying up the edge of the floor runner, I aimed the light at the wood beneath. Most of it was the original dark oak, but one small square section, a patch about 6 inches by 6 inches, near the edge of the step was a slightly lighter color. It had been neatly replaced. It looked newer. And then I saw it. Engraved, almost microscopically on the edge of that replaced piece of wood, was a tiny, faded letter E. Eleanor? Was it a coincidence? I carefully worked the screwdriver under the edge of the replaced section. It went perfectly cut, but with some effort it yielded. I managed to lift the square piece of wood, and under that patch, nestled in the dark space beneath the floorboards, was a small, silk drawstring bag. It was the kind of bag jewelry comes in. My heart hammered against my ribs. I pulled the bag out. It was cold and smelled faintly of dust and old perfume. I untied the drawstring with trembling fingers. Inside the bag, I found 2 things. First, a small, square, shiny white tile, the kind you would find in a modern bathroom, utterly out of place with the Victorian house. It was hard, slick, and capable of causing a devastating slip. Second, a heavily folded piece of paper. I opened it up. It was a handwritten note from Eleanor to David. The note was dated 3 days before her death. It read, I know about the money, David, and I know about your debt. If you don't call off the transfer by tomorrow, I'm telling your father and the police. You won't manipulate me into silence again. I'm leaving you, and I'm taking everything that's mine. The paper fluttered in my shaking hand. It wasn't just Martha. It was David, too. Eleanor wasn't planning to leave him because he was volatile or demanding. She was threatening to expose him for financial wrongdoing, and David needed her silence more than he needed her life. The air in the house seemed to thicken into a toxic gas. The small velvet bag, the slick tile, and the desperate damning note from Eleanor were irrefutable proof. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't just Martha's monstrous overreach. This was a conspiracy. Eleanor's note was clear. David was involved in something illegal. The money, his debt, the transfer. Her death had silenced her just when she was about to expose him to his father and the police. I reread the note, my hands steady now, fueled by a cold, righteous anger. The initial horror I felt for Martha was instantly eclipsed by a terrifying realization about my husband. David wasn't merely the victim of his mother's overzealous protection. He was the reason his mother felt she had to act. If Martha, the great protector, had strategically placed the tile, it was only because David was facing ruin. Did David know she was going to do it? Did he encourage it? Or did he simply walk into the hallway, see his wife dead, and realize his problems were solved, and his mother would cover for him? I put the tile and the note back in the silk bag, replaced the floorboard, and smoothed the rug. I knew then that I couldn't go to the police yet. If I implicated Martha, David would likely skate free, forever grateful for his mother's sacrifice, and I would be left fighting against two powerful, wealthy people who would portray me as the jealous second wife. My target shifted from Martha to David. He was the root of the rot. I started observing David with the analytical precision of a detective. His grief now looked like relief. His occasional sadness looked like the intermittent panic of a man who knows a bomb is ticking somewhere nearby. When he was stressed about work, he wasn't stressed about reports. He was stressed about exposure. Martha intensified her surveillance of me. She called daily, dropping subtle but chilling reminders. "I hope you're keeping warm, Clara. These old houses can be so drafty, and you wouldn't want to slip on the stairs." She was confirming her suspicion that I had understood her gift and was testing my resolve to keep the secret. She wanted me frightened and silent, but the secret had not silenced me. It had radicalized me. I knew I needed proof that tied David to the financial ruin Eleanor mentioned. I needed a reason for the police to reopen the case, something beyond the testimony of a desperate daughter-in-law and a single tile. I started with his study. He kept it locked, claiming it held sensitive financial documents related to his business. Now, I knew it probably held something far more incriminating. David was meticulous. He had a small safe hidden behind a bookshelf. I had always assumed it held passports and spare jewelry. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, while David was at a long corporate retreat, I decided to find out. I remembered something Martha had once mocked Eleanor for. That girl had the memory of a gnat. She used our anniversary date for all her silly passwords. David and Eleanor's anniversary was October 12th. David's birthday was June 4th. Martha's was February 20th. I tried all three. None worked. I sat back, defeated, staring at the shelf. Then I remembered the single unnerving time David had let slip a number while arguing with his mother. It was about Eleanor's life insurance payout. He had shouted, "It's enough for the 719, Mom." "Stop worrying." I tried 0719. The safe clicked open. Inside, there weren't just passports. There were bank statements, a thick, leather-bound journal, and several notarized documents. I went straight for the journal. David's handwriting was unmistakable. It chronicled not love, but a terrifying descent into debt and desperation. Entry: October 5th. Eleanor found out about the offshore account. She's threatening to tell Dad everything. She doesn't understand. If I lose the trust fund, I lose everything. I can't let her. I just can't. Entry: October 8th. Mom is hysterical. She says she won't let Eleanor ruin me. She said she has a plan. I don't want to know the details. I just told her to make sure Eleanor is gone before Friday. I don't care how. The air left my lungs. He didn't just stand by, he ordered it. He knew, and he gave his mother the go-ahead. He had used his mother's toxic, overprotective love as a weapon. The final sickening detail: entry: October 13th, the day after Eleanor's death. It's done. Mom is amazing. The police were here, but she handled everything. The house is finally quiet. I get the life insurance, the debt is cleared, and Mom says she took care of the evidence. I'm free. Thank you, Mom. I owe you everything. I closed the journal, my hands shaking so violently I almost dropped it. The beautiful, grieving widower was an icy, cold-blooded killer who outsourced the act to his mother. My plan had to be foolproof. I knew the police wouldn't touch this without overwhelming evidence. I needed to present them with a neat package: motive, means, and confession. I had the motive, the journal and the note, and the means, the tile. Now I needed the confession. Martha's on tape. My fear was gone, replaced entirely by a laser focus on bringing justice to Eleanor and exposing the two monsters who had used love and trust to commit murder. The only way to win against a master manipulator like Martha was to beat her at her own game of shocking confession. I spent the night with David's journal and Eleanor's note locked safely in a deposit box outside the city. My mission was no longer about survival. It was about justice. David and Martha had created a perfect crime, but they had underestimated one thing: my willingness to fight fire with fire. The most crucial piece of evidence remaining was Martha's recorded confession. A simple, audio-only conversation wouldn't be enough to convict a pillar of the community, but combined with David's journal, Eleanor's note, and the replaced stair patch, it would force the police to act. My plan required two things: Martha alone and Martha in a state of controlled panic. I knew Martha thrived on perceived control and fear. I decided to use the one thing she feared most: losing David, not just to prison, but to the knowledge that her sacrifice might have been in vain. I sent her a cryptic text message: "Meet me at the house tomorrow at 11 a.m. David's past is about to catch up to him. I have proof that Eleanor wasn't silenced. She confided in someone before the accident. The lie was enough to inject fear. Martha would rush over, convinced I had found some third-party confidant of Eleanor, not realizing I already had the full picture." The next morning, I set the trap. I placed my phone, recording, inside a porcelain statue of an angel on the mantelpiece, a grotesque irony given the conversation I expected to record. I positioned it in the sunroom, the same place she had delivered her initial chilling confession. At precisely 11 a.m., Martha's luxury SUV screeched to a halt in the driveway. She burst in, radiating fury and anxiety. "Clara, what is the meaning of this childish charade? What proof? What confidant?" she hissed, her elegant composure fractured. I stood there, calm and unnervingly composed. "Sit down, Martha. I know everything." I used the phrase deliberately, letting her imagination fill in the blanks. "Eleanor wasn't silent, Martha. She told someone about the debt and the transfer. That person reached out to me. They know that David was sinking financially, and they know Eleanor was planning to tell Mr. Thompson. Martha's eyes widened with pure terror. No, that's impossible. David and I made sure no one knew about that. It was between the three of us. Did she write a letter? Where is it? You must give it to me. The person is safe, Martha. But they want money. A lot of money to keep quiet. I lied, pushing the panic further. They said they have a timeline of the weeks leading up to the accident, proving David's desperation. They even mentioned the missing piece of evidence. I paused, letting the silence hang heavy. They mentioned the tile, Martha. The slick white tile you placed under the rug. Martha's composure completely dissolved. She didn't deny it. She went into defensive mode, not for herself, but for her son. They don't know the full story, she cried, gesturing wildly. The tile was my idea, yes, but only because David was terrified. He called me that week, frantic, saying Eleanor was going to destroy his life and reputation. He begged me to help him. I did it for him. I protected him from that harpy. I made the transfer look like her idea. I bought the replacement wood. She stood over me, her hands trembling. I sacrificed my soul for my son. It wasn't murder, Clara. It was mercy, mercy for David. And you dare to threaten that sacrifice for money? So you admit you caused her death? I pressed, my voice flat, ensuring the crucial words were on the recording. I made sure she fell. Yes, I ensured David's future. And if you dare to threaten his freedom, I will ensure you meet the same fate, you little replacement. She shrieked, her face contorted with hate. The recording was perfect. It had the motive, saving David from exposure, the means, the tile, and the direct confession. I felt a surge of triumph mixed with fear. I had what I needed. Good, I whispered, reaching for the statue, because I don't need the third party. I have everything I need right here. Just as my fingers wrapped around my phone, the front door burst open. Clara, Mom, what is going on here? My retreat ended early and the security system flagged unauthorized entry. It was David. He was back 3 days early, furious and confused. He looked from his mother's terrified, sweat-streaked face to my icy, triumphant one. He knew instantly that he had walked into a catastrophe. David, darling, she knows, Martha whimpered, her face collapsing into tears. She knows about Eleanor. She's blackmailing us. David's gaze snapped to me, venomous. He saw the phone in my hand. He saw the truth written on my face. The phone, he growled, taking a menacing step toward me. Give me the phone, Clara. Now. I backed away, clutching the phone that held their entire dark truth. No, David. This is for Eleanor, and this is for me. He lunged. He was strong, panicked, and desperate. I stumbled backward, tripping over the very rug that had concealed their first crime. My back hit the wall with a sickening thud, and the phone flew out of my grasp, skidding across the hardwood floor and sliding, horrifyingly, right under the heavy antique sofa. Martha shrieked. David stopped, his eyes darting between the inaccessible phone and me. The room was spinning. The hunters had become the cornered prey, and I was trapped between two monsters in a house full of secrets. David's eyes were wild, flicking between the phone lodged beneath the heavy sofa and my face. He made a guttural noise and started to move the massive piece of furniture. It was antique, solid mahogany, and incredibly heavy. Martha, meanwhile, was paralyzed, leaning against the wall, her confession still echoing in the tense silence. Don't let her get it, David. You can't let her ruin us. As David strained, attempting to shift the sofa, I saw my chance. I dropped low, ignoring the burning pain in my back, and quickly crawled across the floor. I wasn't going to risk reaching for the phone. I had to create a distraction. I grabbed the heavy, decorative fire poker from the hearth. It wasn't meant as a weapon, but the cold, heavy steel in my hand was a sudden, necessary source of power. As David straightened up, panting from the effort of moving the sofa a mere inch, I slammed the butt of the poker against the wall next to the phone line. The sound was deafening, a sharp metallic clang that made David flinch and cover his ears. In that precious second of his distraction, I lunged, sliding my hand under the sofa. My fingers wrapped around the warm glass of the phone. I pulled it out, immediately stopping the recording and sending the audio file to my most secure cloud storage and to my lawyer's encrypted email, a contingency I had set up earlier that morning. "It's too late, David," I said, standing up and holding the phone like a shield. "It's recorded. It's sent. You and your mother confessed to everything. Eleanor's death wasn't an accident. It was a conspiracy to hide your financial crimes." Martha finally reacted, stumbling toward me, her hands outstretched, not to plead but to attack. "You little snake! You will pay for this." David grabbed his mother's arm, his own desperation overriding his need for her. "Stop, Mom. It's done. We're finished." Just then, the front doorbell chimed. It was the police. When I had seen David's car pull up early, I had activated another contingency, pressing the panic button on my security system, which was routed to the local precinct. I knew that having them arrive mid-confrontation was my best chance at survival and justice. 2 officers, drawn by the reported domestic disturbance, stood on the threshold. "Ma'am, is everything all right here?" the lead officer asked, looking at the scene. Martha, hysterical and disheveled, David, sweating and menacing, and me, standing firm, holding a fire poker and a phone. I lowered the poker. My voice, although shaking slightly, was clear and steady. "No, officer. Everything is not all right. I have just recorded a full confession from these 2 people regarding the murder of David's first wife, Eleanor Thompson, 5 years ago. I have the evidence on this phone, and I have evidence of financial crimes related to her death." The officers exchanged a look of disbelief, but the sheer gravity of my statement and the frantic guilt radiating from David and Martha was enough to make them cautious. They secured David and Martha immediately, separating them and starting the preliminary questioning. I provided the officers with the address to my lawyer, the encryption key, and the location of the concealed evidence in the staircase, the replaced patch, the tile, and David's journal. I handed over my phone, ensuring they understood the importance of the recording. The next few weeks were a blur of legal meetings, police interviews, and the inevitable media frenzy. The Thompson family imploded spectacularly. Mr. Thompson, shattered by the double betrayal of his wife and son, cooperated fully, desperate to save the family name from the financial scandal. The evidence was overwhelming. The recording, David's journal entry giving the direct order to Martha, the forensic examination of the stairs confirming the replaced wood and the indentation for the tile. It all corroborated Eleanor's note. David and Martha were formally charged with conspiracy to commit murder and obstruction of justice. The media coverage was relentless, painting Martha as the ultimate monster mother and David as the cruel, entitled manipulator who sacrificed his own wife for financial gain. I finalized the separation, leaving the house and all its poisonous memories behind. I didn't want the house, the money, or anything that linked me to their toxic lives. I simply wanted my freedom and justice for Eleanor. I attended the first day of the trial. Seeing David and Martha sitting there, stripped of their power and their facades, was the only closure I needed. They glanced at me with pure hatred, but their power was gone. They were just two people facing the consequences of their terrifying selfishness. I never looked back. I started a new life, in a new city, teaching at a small, friendly school. I found peace in the mundane reality of simple, honest living. The day the verdicts came down, guilty on all counts, I was on a beach, watching the sunset. I didn't cheer, I didn't cry. I simply felt the heavy burden of the secret lift from my shoulders. The ghost in the attic was finally resting, and so was I. I walked away from the house of secrets, taking nothing but my truth and my life. And that was everything. Thank you for listening to this difficult confession. We are so grateful to share these stories with you. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and share your thoughts in the comments section below.